I'm Brittany. This is Eddie, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things. Today, we continue reading Volume 2 of Husky and His White Cat Shizun. We are on page 205 for chapter 64, which is called This Venerable One Tells Shidi a Story. We are learning potentially some things about Chuaning, or a past Chuaning, or there was a Chuaning in the past. Maybe it was a relative. We're not entirely sure, but there are some developments having taken place that are very curious in regard to the Shizun here. So we're just gonna read and I guess find out maybe more about that. Maybe it gets played. Who knows? Who knows? We are in precarious territory at the moment. We usually read for a couple of hours and for about 40 to 50 pages, somewhere in there. There are trigger warnings down in the description. Please avail yourself of them if you need to. And no spoilers, please, because we have people in the chat who this is their first time experiencing it, right along with me. I've never read this before. I don't think I've said that in a second. I feel like it's kind of plainly obvious, but just in case you're brand new here, hi. I have absolutely no idea what's going on, and I read off the cuff. It's a reading reaction, but we really need a nickname for that has far less syllables because it's not catchy in the slightest. We take a break about halfway through around there somewhere for about 5 to 10 minutes to stand up. I usually go get some more tea, pet a cat. You guys can grab a snack, do stuff. So we have that around 4 if you're on the same time that I am. And then we keep going for the rest of the time. So, doing our best to find out what the hell is going on, Moran looked in the direction the voice had come from, only to see its source waddling unsteadily in a little jog from the stone steps of the residence. It was a small child, 3 or 4 years old, a bamboo pinwheel in hand as he bounced toward Chugongja. He was dressed simply, with a jade pendant hanging around his neck, along with a lock of entrusted name, which comes with a footnote that says, traditional jewelry shaped like a lock and worn around the neck. Parents take their 1-month-old child to cultivators or a temple to be given an entrusted name so that the child can receive the protection of the gods or the Buddha. The lock represents binding the child to life. Interesting. I hadn't heard of that before. Along with a lock of entrusted name for good fortune and a protection amulet of red silk. He looked every bit like Moran's little Shidi, just smaller. Moran stared. Now he knew the true reason those riders had been gossiping. He couldn't help muttering, Shidi, you and Shizun are both from Linan, and Shizun even has the Chu name. Do you think this Chu family from 200 years ago might be your ancestors, and that you two might be distant relatives? Seems pretty likely to me. That was one of my guesses. Chu Wanning said nothing, staring at the father and son. He'd never known his own origins, and he didn't remember much of his childhood either. Could this Chugongja really be his ancestor? He was still pondering this when Moran reached the front of the line. Chugongja was about to hand Moran a talisman when he looked up to see an unfamiliar face. He paused minutely before smiling gently. Is it your first time here? His voice was mellow and refined, worlds apart from Chu Wanning's ice-cold severity. Yeah. Being suddenly spoken to in such an open and friendly manner by someone who looked just like his Shizun had Moran feeling some kind of way. And he had to scramble to get his bearings. The governor Gongja smiled. My name is Chushun. May I ask for yours? My name is Moran. From where does Mo Gongja hail? Really far away from, Sichuan. Chushun Gongja, whew. I expected that to be more of a train wreck, was gentle and amiable, but Moran couldn't shake the feeling that the man could see right through him. That isn't it. So it's really just the Chu family line. Something about the entire Chu family line just cuts right to the heart of this poor gay boy. Hello? That is indeed quite far away, Chushun agreed with a smile. Then he paused, his gaze shifting down toward Chu Wanning, and surprise crossed his refined features. And this is? My name is Chiasini, Chu Wanning supplied. Moran pulled him closer and patted him on the head, forcing a smile. This is my little brother, he said as he thought. He doesn't look like me, but he sure looks like you. Maybe it was because battle was imminent and there were more pressing matters at hand, and therefore Chushun didn't have time to dwell on it. Or maybe it was because he was merely part of an illusion, and didn't have the ability to really react to something that didn't originally belong in this fabricated realm. Whatever the case, he stared at Chu Wanning for a while, his brows scrunched together, then simply handed them each a talisman. These are difficult times, and you are our guests from afar, so please accept these talismans. If you have no other plans, then please stay for a couple of days. I've heard that Gongja intends to bring the people of the city to Putuo. I think that was right, said Moram. What are the talismans for? These are spirit-quenching talismans, Chushun explained. When worn on the body, they can conceal the aura of the living. Moran understood at once. Oh, I get it. If the aura of a living being is sealed, then any ghosts they meet won't be able to tell them apart from the dead. That way, even if we walk right past some ghosts, they'll be too confused to do anything. Chushun smiled. Exactly. Understanding that Chushun Gongja was quite busy, Moran didn't want to take up more of his time with questions, so he thanked the man and pulled his little Shidi along to the side. The two of them found a spot by a wall to sit down. Moran turned toward Chu Wanning to see the boy staring in a daze at the talisman. What are you thinking about? He asked. I was thinking that this is a solid plan. Chu Wanning murmured, still deep in thought. But in that case, just what happened to prevent them from escaping in the end? Is it not in the records? This 200-year-old disaster is covered in the most detail in the Lenan records, but even the book only spares a few lines of text to describe it. What does it say? Lenan was besieged, the situation therein unknown. By the time the resistance army broke through, corpses lay strewn across the roads, and the vast majority of houses were empty. Of the approximately 100 people of the governor's residence and the 740 common folk, none survived. Are cultivation kids more advanced? Because he's 6 or 7. 5 or 6. I've been meaning to ask this because it stands out to me that a 6-year-old not normally this. Granted, it's Chu Wanning as a 6-year-old, but like I'm wondering to what degree would Moran notice like there's a difference between I mean, it wasn't like he was dumb, but for your average person, maybe not Moran, to notice the difference between like, oh, an exceptional 6-year-old and an impossible 6-year-old. You know what I mean? I'm just wondering. After a long moment of silence, Moran said, Nothing about how they died? Do we want to know? I don't want to know. Nothing. Lenan was completely surrounded and hardly anyone made it. The feathered tribe saved a lucky few later on, but they rarely involve themselves in mortal affairs, so they see things differently from how we do. As far as they're concerned, the truth of what happened isn't all that important, and even if they knew, they still wouldn't talk about it unless there was some particular need to do so. Chu Wanning paused. But since these people are setting off in 2 days, we'll learn what happened soon enough. In the meantime, we might as well walk around and see if we can find some clues. The two of them tucked away their spirit-quenching talismans for safekeeping and were just getting up to leave when there was a flurry of footsteps, followed by a tug on Chu Wanning's sleeve. Xiaoguge? Chu Wanning turned around. It was the little Gongja who looked just like him. Xiaoguge? No, the boy said in a small, childish voice. Papa said you two don't have anywhere to stay, so if you don't mind, you can stay with us tonight. Chu Wanning and Moran looked at each other. Is that really okay? Moran asked. Your papa is already so busy. It's okay. The little fellow grinned guilelessly. Lots of people with nowhere to go are staying with us already. We're all living together. Papa keeps the ghosts away at night so we don't have to be scared. He spoke with little pauses, not yet used to linking so many words together, but his open sincerity was heartwarming. Okay, we'll be imposing on you tonight then, said Moran. Thank you, shouted he. No worries, no worries. Watching him bounce away, Moran tugged on Chu Ning's hand. Hey, really, I gotta say something. I know what you want to say, so shut it. Oh, read my mind again. Moran ruffled his hair, grinning. Once we get back to Sishung Peak, I really gotta ask Shizun about this. Between the two of you, one looks like the dad and the other looks like the son. There's no way you guys aren't related to Governor Chu. After a moment, Chu Wanning said, So what? Even if we do turn out to be related, what then? Huh? Chu Wanning looked mildly toward the father and son beneath the tree. It's all in the past anyway, he said expressionlessly. They're already dead. Then he turned and walked away. Ow. Chu Wanning, why would you hurt my feelings in such a way? Moran stood rooted in place for a while before running after him. Oi, aren't you a little too young to be so cynical? He muttered. Even if they're dead, they're still your ancestors. If I were you, I'd definitely erect a shrine for them, with a statue 9 feet tall, all gold, decked out in jewelry, and burn incense for them every year. I'm counting on my ancestors for protection, you know? Hey, why are you walking so fast? While wandering through the city, they noticed that every family was gathering straw and making straw men. When they inquired about the practice, they were told Chu Shungongja, had asked the citizens to do it. Everyone in the city, young and old alike, had to have a matching straw man in which to insert a talisman with a drop of that person's blood. These would substitute for them as decoy puppets. It was the same basic idea as tossing a bunch of meat-stuffed mantua into a river as offerings to a river deity that demanded human heads. Some ghosts and deities were simply, fundamentally, not that smart. Any little trick could fool them, like that ghost mistress from Butterfly Town who'd had nothing but mud rattling around between its ears. It seemed that Chushun had arranged at least 2 layers of precautions for his citizens. The first was the spirit-quenching talismans, so that they wouldn't be discovered by ghosts while running away. The second was these straw puppets, which would act as decoys to buy some time for their escape, so that the ghosts wouldn't immediately notice everyone in the city had vanished and become infuriated. This only made the haze in Moran and Chu Ning's hearts heavier. How had such a carefully crafted plan end up falling through? They returned to the governor's residence, filled with misgivings. It was dark by then, and many families had brought bedding to stay the night within the Shangqing barrier rather than returning to their homes. The governor kept his gates open at night, with only a few guards patrolling the premises. By the time Moran and Chu Wanning arrived, all the rooms of the residence were filled, with at least 3 or 4 families huddled in each. People were crowded everywhere, with hardly any room left to stand. In the end, they could only find a corridor to rest in. There was no bedding, of course, so Moran patted the ground with some straw he had requested from the guards, picked up Chu Wanning, and laid him on the makeshift pallet. You'll have to make do with this tonight. Looks comfortable enough, said Chu Wanning. Really? Moran laughed. I thought so too. He flopped down next to Chu Wanning and stretched, then folded his arms behind his head and stared up at the wooden beams of the ceiling above. Shidi, take a look. Those bird people aren't half bad at weaving illusions, huh? They only have a survivor's memories to serve as foundation, so it's really something that the illusion is so detailed. You can even see the texture of the wood on the ceiling. The feathered tribe are half immortal after all, said Chu Wanning. Even if they're not omnipotent, they're capable of feats beyond mortal ability. I guess so, Moran blinked, then rolled to face Chu Wanning, propping his head up. I can't sleep. Chu Wanning glanced toward him and stared. What do you want, a bedtime story? Can you imagine the 6-year-old rolling over and be like, what do you want, a bedtime story? Like, Jesus, dude. He was being sarcastic, but Moran's face was as thick as the city walls. Yes, please, he laughed. I want the one about Dongyang and the 7 fairies. No! He's cute. He's also a 32-year-old tyrant in a teen's body. So the idea of him being like, oh my god, story time, is particularly wholesome. Chu Wanning hadn't expected him to take the offer seriously and was taken aback for a moment before turning away in a huff. You wish. How old are you? Aren't you embarrassed? Moran grinned. It's only human to want the things we can't have. Stop that right now. That's got nothing to do with age. I never had anyone tell me bedtime stories when I was small, and I always thought about how nice it would have been to have someone like that. They keep casually devastating me. I don't appreciate it. But that someone never showed up. And then I grew up and stopped thinking about it. Even so, deep inside, I still want it. It's the emotional neglect, you know? It's the childhood emotional neglect, she said, with no personal experience whatsoever. Chu Wanning was silent. You didn't have anyone to tell you bedtime stories either, did you? Oh, we have art! Huh, so you don't actually know how the story of Dongyung and the Seven Fairies goes, right? What's the point in those silly stories anyway? Chu Wanning asked after a long pause. Just admit you don't know it. Don't write it off as a silly story either, or you're gonna grow up into a boring person like my Shizun and everyone will avoid you. Who cares if everyone avoids me? Chu Wanning snapped. I'm going to sleep. With that, he lay down and closed his eyes. Moran rolled around with laughter until he rolled over next to Chu Wanning. When he gazed at his little Shidi with his eyes closed, his eyelashes long and dark, looking quite adorable, he reached out to pinch his cheek. Are you really asleep? I'm really asleep. Moran laughed. Then you keep sleeping and I'll tell you a bedtime story. You know one? Yep, just like you know how to sleep talk. Chu Wanning shut up. Moran lay next to him on the straw bed, their heads mere inches away. He cackled for a bit, but after a while, when he saw that his Shidi was pointedly ignoring him, he stopped being quite so boisterous and instead gazed up at the ceiling, eyes still lit with mirth. Now and again, the smell of the straw wafted over them, accompanied by the quiet sounds of night. What an appropriate time to show you the art. Like, that's just sweet and wholesome. That cannot be. Discouraged is not the right word I'm looking for. No one is impervious to this wholesomeness. Look at that. The story I'm about to tell you is one I made up myself. I envied those who had bedtime stories when I was young, but there was nothing for it. So every day I would tell stories to myself while lying in bed. I'll tell you my favorite one now. It's called Ox Eats Grass. This goes back to that old adage, and by old adage, I mean thing I say all the time. If you ever have a kid and you want them to be a writer, generally just kind of an artist or an artistic type, but specifically writer, usually. If you want them to be a writer, all you have to do is have them and then ignore them. And that's how you make a born writer, she says, with no experience whatsoever. Oh, that was the end of the chapter. Okay, so now we're on page 215 for chapter 65, called This Venerable One's Story is Super Bad. Oh no, okay. Having spoken to this point, Moran smiled again before he continued. A long, long time ago, there was a small child. Chu Wanning's eyes were closed. Wasn't this about an ox grazing? What's with this kid? Let me finish, Moran grinned. Once upon a time, there was a small child who was very poor and didn't have a mom or a dad. He was a child laborer in the household of a landlord. He had to wash dishes, wash clothes, and wipe the floors, and also had to take the ox out to graze. Every day, the landlord's household gave him 3 pieces of flatbread to eat, and the child was very happy that he could fill his stomach. One day, he took the ox out to graze, as always. On the road, they bumped into a mad dog that bit the ox's leg. Because of this, the landlord unsurprisingly gave the boy a sound beating. After the beating, the landlord made the boy go kill the mad dog to vent his rage. If the child didn't, the landlord threatened not to give him his flatbread. The child was very scared and could only follow orders, so after he beat that mad dog to death, he brought it back. However, when he came home, the landlord discovered that the dog that bit his ox's leg was actually the beloved pet of the county master. Wow, we're just speeding through this narrative. Chu Wanning opened his eyes. And then what? What else could they do? That dog was the county master's favorite, and due to its master's position, it was used to having its way and being a bully. Who could have imagined it would be beaten to death like that? If the county master were to find out, he wouldn't just let it go. The more the landlord thought about it, the angrier he became, so in the end, he didn't give the child his flatbread. He even threatened to hand the child over if the county master came looking. What is this mess? So unreasonable. I'm not listening to this anymore. Lots of things are unreasonable to begin with, Moran laughed. It's all a matter of who has more money, whose fist is tougher, and whose position is higher. Oh! He's really telling on himself. Ooh. The next day, the county master indeed came knocking, and the child was handed over. But because he was so young, it would have been unbecoming for the county master to lock him up, so he was flogged 10 times and released. Can't lock him up, though. That's unbecoming. And the child ran away after that, right? Chu Wanning asked. He didn't run away. The kid returned to the landlord's household, recovered from his injuries, and went back to tending the ox for them. He was still getting 3 flatbread a day. Wasn't he mad? As long as his stomach was full, he couldn't be mad. Shit. There's some underlying commentary going on in this. A sound beating is just a sound beating. After it's over, it's over. Things were peaceful for over a decade. By that point, the Oxford boy had grown up. One day, when several esteemed guests came to the landlord's house, the landlord's son, who was the same age as the Oxherd, saw one of the guests had brought a particularly beautiful agate snuff bottle. He took a liking to it, so he stole it. The snuff bottle was an heirloom and extremely precious. The guest was quite panicked and looked all over the house for his possession. The landlord's son realized that he wouldn't be able to hide it anymore, so he stuffed the snuff bottle into the Oxherd's hands and told them that if he dared to tell the truth, they would never feed him again and he would starve to death. Having listened to this point, Chu Wanning was at a complete and utter loss for words. He found himself thinking that although Moran had been lost at a young age and had been able to grow up with his family at Sishung Peak, at the very least he had grown up at a pleasure house where his mother was the madam. Even though it couldn't have been the happiest of times, it wouldn't have been miserable either, so why were all the stories he made up so gloomy and sad? Moran went on, quite enjoying himself. The snuff bottle was soon found. The Oxford could only brace himself and take the blame so that he would continue to have food to eat, and naturally, what followed was another viciously sound beating. This time, they beat him so badly that he couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. The landlord's son got away with it all, so he secretly snuck a steamed bun stuffed with marinated pork to the Oxherd. The Oxherd wolfed it down and stopped resenting the landlord's son, even though he'd harmed him. He'd never tasted such a delicacy before, so as he held the bun, he kept saying, "Thank you, thank you." I'm not listening anymore. This time, Chu Wanning was actually aggravated. How could he stop resenting him? One steamed bun and all is forgiven? And thanking him too? What was there to thank? Moran blinked innocently. No, you're not listening carefully. How am I not? That steamed bun was stuffed with marinated pork, Moran said, with a grave air. Chu Wanning was flabbergasted. Look at your face. You don't understand, do you? Usually that kid only got his hands on a scrap or two of fatty meat on New Year's Eve. He had thought he was going to die, never knowing the taste of marinated pork, so of course he'd thank whoever gave him some. At the sight of his little Shidi, stumped speechless by his words, Moran smiled brilliantly. Either way, this incident passed just like that. The boy still collected his 3 daily flatbread, and time went on. One day, Chu Wanning was by now familiar with the pattern of Moran's tales. The moment "one day" was uttered, nothing good could follow. Sure enough, Moran said, one day the landlord's son committed another crime. This time he violated a girl at the neighboring mill, and coincidentally the unlucky Oxherd came upon the scene. And that child is going to take the blame again? Chu Wanning asked. Yeah, Moran laughed. That's right. Congrats, congrats. You know how to tell stories now, too. A pause. Then, I'm going to sleep. No, I'm almost done. This is my first time telling someone a story, so grant me some face, will you? Chu Wanning fell into a disgruntled silence. This time, the oxherd definitely had to take the blame because the girl, unable to take the humiliation, had committed suicide by way of bashing her head into the wall. But the oxherd wasn't dumb. He knew that whoever took the fall would have to pay for this with their life, and there was no way he was going to give his up for the sake of the landlord's son. However, when he refused, the landlord's son locked him and the dead girl inside the mill and ran off to report it to the authorities. This oxherd already had a troubled history. When he was young, he'd randomly beaten the county master's dog to death, then later he'd stolen a guest's snuff bottle, and this time he'd sexually assaulted a common girl. Naturally, he could not be absolved of his crimes. No one was willing to listen to him explain himself. He was caught red-handed with all the evidence, so he was arrested. You know what this is reminding me of? This is reminding me of a certain little girl who encountered a fucking creepy serial killer, and then that was like that domino meme leading to everything else. I think there's a theme with these side stories. Chu Wanning's eyes went wide, typo, sorry. And then he stayed in jail for a few months. When autumn came, he was sentenced to death to be hung at the execution platform outside the city. As he followed along the execution procession winding through the fields, he suddenly saw someone about to slaughter an ox not far in the distance. He could tell at a glance that the ox was the very same one he'd been tending since he was young. Now that it was old, it didn't have the energy to plow the fields, but it still needed to graze. However, if it only ate and performed no labor, what use was it to the landlord? It had plowed fields for them its whole life, but in the end they were going to butcher it and eat its meat. Even as he spoke of this cruelty, Moran wasn't sad. He still smiled. That oxherd had grown up riding on the back of that ox, and he had told it many of his secrets, had fed it hay, had hugged its neck and cried when he'd been wronged, and taken it for his only family in this world. So he knelt down and begged the executioner to let him go bid farewell to the ox. Of course, the executioner didn't believe there could be any such attachment between a man and beast, so he thought the boy was only trying to pull a trick and didn't allow it. And then that oxherd was hung to die. The ox was butchered. Hot blood flowed all over the ground, and those who gathered to watch the show dispersed. That night, the landlord's household ate beef, but the beef was old and kept getting stuck in their teeth. They ate a little, didn't like it, and dumped the rest. Chu Wanning was once again speechless. Moran flipped over, smiling, happy at him. There, it's done. How was it? Get lost, said Chu Wanning. Hey, the first time I made this up for myself, I cried. You're so heartless. You're not even going to cry a little? You suck at telling stories. Moran laughed a bit and put his arm over his little shitty's shoulder to pat him on the head. Well, that can't be helped. Your Xixiang is only so talented. All right, the story's done. Let's sleep. Chu Wanning didn't acknowledge him, but after a long time, he suddenly said, Moran, call me Xixiang. Why is the story called Ox Eats Grass? Because just like people, an ox has to eat. If you want to eat, you have to do a lot of work. If one day you can't work anymore, then no one will care if you're alive or if you're dead. He's not wrong, which is why this is so brutal. Oh. Chu Wanning stopped talking again. From the yard outside there came the muted voices of those seeking refuge, and every now and again an ominous cry or two from ghosts and demons outside the barrier. Moran? Aye, so cheeky. Call me Shishong. Chu Wanning ignored him and asked, Did that child really exist? Nope. Moran was quiet for a moment, then he suddenly smiled, his dimples deep and charming. Why do I keep leaving the window open? Too much green outside. By that I mean it then shines on my face, is where that was going. He squished the little kid into his arms and said warmly, I made it up to tease you, obviously. Be good, go to sleep. Yet unexpectedly, before long, there was a sudden commotion in the yard. Someone was shouting angrily, Are you still trying to see the gongja? The gongja is busy. Who has the time to attend to your business? Toss that corpse aside. Don't you know that the ones with blue dots will rise? Are you trying to get us all killed? This voice was like thunder in the middle of a dark night, and the moment the prospect of a rising corpse was mentioned, there was an uproar. In a flash, everyone who had been asleep was sitting up and looking toward the commotion. Moran shielded the little Shidi behind himself and glanced over, frowning. He said in a low voice. Isn't that the guy from earlier? The individual who was kneeling and being berated was indeed that youth named Shaman, whom they'd met when they arrived. He was still wearing the close-fitting clothing from earlier, but his behavior was entirely different. It was as if his entire person had been emptied out. He could do nothing but cling tightly to the dead body of his adoptive father. The corpse's nails had grown significantly, a sure sign that a corpse would rise. When the others saw this, they all backed away. The head steward was scolding him sharply. Your father was my colleague. I also feel terrible that he was killed. But now what? You were the one who cried for food last night, so he went out to find food for you. You dragged your dad to his death, and now you want to drag us there too? Shaman was kneeling on the ground, his hair wholly disheveled, and his eyes were red as he sobbed. No, I'm not... Daddy, please, I beg you, let me see the gongsha. The gongsha has a way to stop my dad's corpse from rising. I want to bury him properly, please. I beg you all, don't dismember him. Shit. By the time he uttered the word dismember, he was choking on his sobs. He buried his face in his palms and wiped messily at his trembling lips. Please, I'm begging you, let me wait until the gongsha comes back. It's going to be midnight soon, and the gongsha is out. So how can he possibly attend to your wishes? You know that normal corpses can still be purified, but your dad's got those blue spots and his nails have already changed. How can he hope to hold out until the gongsha gets back? No, he can... Uncle Lou, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll think of a way to repay you after. Please, I beg you. Just don't touch my daddy. I beg you. The middle-aged steward let out a long sigh at his pleading, the rims of his eyes also turning red. Even so, he replied, I can't do that for you, not when it would cost everyone else their lives as well. Guards! No, don't! It was too late. No one would help the boy. Everyone knew that if his corpse was left intact, then when midnight came, it would inevitably turn into a ferocious spirit. The corpse of Shaman's adopted father was forcibly dragged away to be dismembered outside. Several people held the boy back, and his bitter tears flowed furiously, sullying his whole face as bestial howls escaped his lips. In the end, he was still half pulled, half dragged away into the distance. Once the storm had passed, and after some muttered whispers, the yard returned to its peaceful quiet. However, Chu Wanning did not fall back asleep. He lowered his head pensively. Moran glanced sidelong at his little Shidi. What are you thinking about? That person lost his father, then did something terribly foolish. Then, on top of that, his father's body was wrested from him. Of course he'd resent everyone. I can't be sure, but I suspect that he was the one who botched Leinan's migration. I think so too, Moran replied without missing a beat. Chu Wanning shook his head. It's too early to tell. We can't make any conclusive claims yet. Let's just keep an eye on him for now. That was the end of the chapter. We're on page 225 for chapter 66, which is called This Venerable One Sees the Heavenly Rift for the First Time. By the second day, nothing unusual had happened. Chushun sent guards to tally the number of straw men in the city to make sure that it matched the number of people, while the people busied themselves packing their few possessions. Just one more night and they would leave, first thing in the morning, to take refuge at Putuo in accordance with Chushun's plan. Moran sat by the gate of the governor's residence, watching the people come and go. He sighed. Chushun's plan is watertight. Unless someone leaked the info, the average ghost wouldn't have the brains to figure out that only decoy puppets will be left in the city. Someone must have ratted them out. Shidi, what do you think? No response. Huh? Shidi? Moran turned around. Without him noticing, his little Shidi had wandered off to watch a squadron of riders getting ready, and in his place was Chugongja's son, sitting with his cheeks in hand. Dagaga. Moran almost jumped at his sudden appearance. What is it? The little fellow pointed at an old paulownia tree nearby in which a kite dangled from a high branch. Mama gave it to me. It got stuck. Can't reach, he articulated with some difficulty. Dagaga, help me? No problem, no problem. Moran leapt nimbly to the top of the tree, using Qinggong, retrieved the butterfly-shaped kite, and landed steadily back on the ground, smiling as he returned it. Here you go. Don't lose it again, okay? The little boy nodded. Moran watched him wandering around alone for a bit. He found himself thinking that Chushun probably didn't have the time to look after his son. Where's your mom? It's a bit busy around here, so I'll take you to her. Mama? Mama is at the mountains in the back. What's she doing in the mountains? Moran asked, mystified. Sleeping, the kid answered in a soft voice, looking at him guilelessly. Mama's always sleeping there. Papa takes me to see her when the flowers bloom in the spring. I had a feeling. Ah, Moran uttered quietly, at a loss for words. The boy didn't mind. He was still too young to understand what death meant. He played happily with the kite in his hands for a bit, then looked up at Moran and shuffled over. Good, thank you, he said in a whisper. I have something to give you. He dug around in his pocket as he spoke and finally produced a small half piece of pastry wrapped in a reed leaf. No one in the city had enough to eat these days, so it was a mystery as to how the little guy had managed to save a piece of pastry. He broke it in half and handed the smaller piece to Moran. Dagaga, for you. Shh, don't tell anyone else. I don't have any more. Moran was about to accept it when the boy suddenly changed his mind and took the smaller piece back, offering him the bigger half instead. It's really yummy. There's sweet bean paste inside. This small act made Moran's heart all warm and fuzzy. He was used to poor treatment and didn't quite know how to respond to charity. Oh, that's right! He reached out and took the sweet with a mumbled thanks. The boy seemed quite pleased and grinned brightly, the curve of his dark eyelashes filled with warmth and kindness. Moran couldn't bear to eat the flour cake, so he wrapped it up using a leaf from the paulownia tree and tucked it in his robes. He intended to talk further with the kid, but in the end, the boy was a little kid with a little kid's attention span. He had already bounced away into the distance. Chu Wanning came back around that point, only to see Moran standing there, staring off into space. He raised an eyebrow. What's up? Moran watched the boy disappear and sighed. I was just thinking, all these people. How come they all had to die? Well, that's some growth. Uh-huh. That's much better than, like, who the fuck cares as to why all these people... Why would I give a shit what happens to anybody else unless it's directly relevant to me? Please. Night descended. Dark clouds covered the skies while occasional bolts of lightning ripped through the heavens. As the night grew deeper, a terrible gale howled amidst a torrential downpour. Rain and its attendant yin energy enhanced the powers of ghosts and other fiends. Chushun gathered the survivors of Linan near his residence and bid them stay inside the Shangqing barrier at all times. Due to the rain, many of the areas that could usually be used as places of respite no longer served as such. Moran kept an eye on Xiaoman, but when more and more people crowded into the governor's residence to take shelter from the rain, Xiaoman ducked out of view. Damn, Moran muttered. I'll go after him, Chu Wanning said immediately. He was small, after all, and he swiftly dove into the crowd and disappeared. He returned after a while with an irate expression. He got away. Outside the barrier? Moran fell silent, gazing at the downpour outside and the people bustling to and fro. This was all only an illusion of events that had come to pass 200 years ago, but he suddenly felt so wretched. The people around them had such hope on their faces. They believed that as soon as dawn broke, Chushun would take them to Putuo, away from this ghost-infested hell. In the pouring rain, guards dressed in white and red put their all into making the final preparations so that they would be ready to move when the sun rose. None of them knew how little time they had left. The night grew later still, and the noise died down as people dozed off, leaning against one another. However, Chu Wanning and Moran were wide awake. Their task was to wait for the Ghost King to appear and to kill him. Since Xiaoman had already left the barrier, this night had to be the turning point. Moran turned to glance at Chu Wanning. Why don't you get some rest? I'll wake you if anything happens. I'm not sleepy, said Chu Wanning. Moran stroked his hair. Then eat something. We haven't eaten since coming here. When Chu Wanning saw the pastry Moran produced, the words, not hungry, were replaced by a gulp. Moran handed it over. Here you go. Something, something, kindness begetting kindness, something, something. Chu Wanning accepted the sweet and broke it in half, giving the larger half back to Moran and keeping the smaller portion for himself. Moran stared blankly at him, face unreadable. I almost said face unbearable. Whoops. Sorry. Jotting a note real quick. Chu Wanning took a bite and uttered a questioning, before asking, is this from Peach Blossom Springs? The flavor is a bit different from the ones before. How so? It tastes of osmanthus flowers. Moran forced a smile. Oh, Chushun's son gave it to me. It's probably traditional for Linan. It is indeed. Chu Wanning was opening his mouth to take another bite when he froze, as if he suddenly realized something. All the color drained from his face. That's not right. Chu Wanning shot to his feet, eyes wide and expression ghastly. Moran hadn't the slightest idea what the problem was. What's not right? Chu Wanning didn't answer. Instead, he walked into the courtyard and looked around in the pouring rain before picking up a sharp rock and firmly cutting into his own arm. Blood gushed out. Moran grabbed him hurriedly. Are you crazy? Chu Wanning stared at the blood trickling down his arm for a moment before his head snapped up, eyes intense. Have you still not cut on? He said harshly. Someone means us harm. Blood ran down his arm non-stop, the crimson diluted by the rain. Chu Wanning's face was pale in the deluge, his dark brows knitted tightly together and thoroughly drenched by the ceaseless downpour. Thunder rumbled and lightning split the skies, and for an instant the harsh light turned night into day. The sudden clap of thunder jolted Moran into understanding. He subconsciously took a step back. He knew what wasn't right. Nothing in an illusion was real, however realistic it might seem. Wait, yeah! Hang on! Wait. Then wouldn't he... But then that... Wait! What? That's right! I'm so silly! It should have been impossible for a pastry to have any taste. Or for a weapon to actually cause them injury. In short, it should have been impossible for anything within the illusion to affect them. Someone manifested the illusion, Chu Wanning said quietly. Manifesting an illusion. Everybody fucking sit forward. Manifesting an illusion, also known as illusion reification, was no easy task. The ones most skilled in this technique were those, here we are again, were those of the Guaya sect, whose motto was, medicine for the people, divine physician for the heart. The latter half of the saying referred to the fact that some of them specialized in the art of manifesting illusions. Many people were unable to accept the passing of a loved one, but through illusion reification, the dead could once more accompany the living. What? However, manifesting illusions was extremely difficult, so generally speaking, only short individual scenes could be created, such as sharing a drink or taking a nap together. It would be only one thing at most. This illusion, on the other hand, was extensive and continuous, with a large variety of events, and moreover, it had been constructed by the feathered tribe. Even Guea's own sect leader might not be able to manifest at all. Moran immediately thought of sorry, brain, backing up, on me. Moran immediately thought of someone else. Could it be that fake Gochen from Jincheng Lake? No. I mean, he can already do the, that thing that I can't think of the name of right now, but I'm pretty sure it has 3 words to it, and it's really horrifying because it puppets people. Formation, chess something formation. Before he could think on it further, a strange sound burst forth from the skies above. The dozing people jolted awake like startled birds, looking around with wide eyes before they finally stared up. For a moment, it was deathly silent. Zhenlong, thank you. Zhenlong chess formation, thank you. For a moment it was deathly silent. Then screams erupted like an explosion of water droplets and boiling oil. Wait, wouldn't this mean that the fake Gocheng was around 200 years ago? No, he's made it real. What? Okay, questions. Sorry. The people tried to flee in every direction, only to discover there was nowhere to go, and screams came from all sides. There was a fracture in the sky, and an enormous blood-red ghost eye stared unnervingly down from directly above. The eye was so close that it was practically pressed against the barrier. A harsh, garbled voice boomed forth. Chushun, how very bold of you! A mere mortal daring to deceive this venerable one. The Ghost King! Moran muttered. There were 9 kings of the Ghost Realm, and some were far stronger than others. The one before them now had yet to show himself, so there was no way to tell which one he was. That lone eyeball loomed in the sky, dripping with blood as it stared at the building below. Such arrogance! Absurd! You wish to save him, pathetic mortal? I might not have wiped out your city before, but since you wish to stand against me, I'll kill every single one of you. None shall be spared. With a shrill shriek, a blinding red light shot from the ghost eye, aimed directly at the barrier. Crimson clashed with gold, and for an instant all the other colors of the world ceased to be. The force of the impact sent debris flying into the howling gale and relentless rain. The tree branches in the courtyard snapped one after another. The citizens inside the barrier grew hysterical, wailing as they huddled together. The Shangqing barrier withstood the first hit, but another flash of red followed immediately after and struck the same spot. The barrier held out, but a crack appeared. How arrogant, insufferable. The red light struck again and again, the impacts thundering and sparks flying. When the barrier was on the verge of collapse, Chu Anning's blood ran cold. Now that the illusion had been manifested, any attack that landed would be no different from one in the real world. If that attack were to hit them, both he and Moran might die. Golden light gathered at his fingertips. This would surely blow his cover, but the situation being what it is, he had no choice. He was about to summon Tianwen and get it over with when a resplendent bolt of light flew across the sky like an arrow and headed directly for the epicenter of the cracks in the barrier. The crowd turned to see Chushun standing on a tall roof. He cradled a phoenix harp, and as his fingertips danced across its strings, they sent bolts of light sweeping forth to gather at the barrier. Each strum was as sharp and powerful as the rupturing of metal. Okay, Lenjen, and they instantly reinforced the Shangqing barrier that had nearly failed. Gongja is here! Gongja! The people below exclaimed one after another, some even crying with joy. Chushun held his own against the eye of the Ghost King. The pair exchanged 100 moves in an instant, and the Ghost King was altogether unable to encroach past the barrier. The cold voice rang again across the sky, even more menacingly. Chushun, with your skills, you could have easily escaped by yourself. Why do you insist on meddling in affairs unrelated to you and making an enemy of the ghost realm? Your Majesty wishes harm upon my citizens. How could anything be less unrelated to me? All right. Ridiculous. We ghosts feed on the souls of the living. There is no difference between us eating souls and you eating meat. You will understand soon enough, once you're dead. Chushun didn't miss a beat, the notes of his harp never pausing. Then we'll just have to see if your Majesty can take this head from my shoulders. Oh! Okay! As he spoke, the cords beneath his fingers rose to a crescendo until a brilliant light pierced the heavens right into the bloody eye in the sky. Be hot about it! Shit! Chuaning's whole ass bloodline just can't fucking help themselves. The terrifying scream shook the very ground they stood on. Fetid blood sprayed from where the eye had been burned by Chushun's spell, and the crimson downpour mixed with his shrill shrieks. In his anger, the Ghost King unleashed a blade of light many times stronger than those before it, striking out through the sanguine rain. Chushun moved a block, but this attack was unlike the others, and the force of the impact forced him back several steps. The notes of his harp stuttered. Gongja! Crack! There's a crack! The barrier is going to break! The crowd panicked. Those with families huddled together and sobbed, while those without cowered in corners and quivered. Chushun gritted his teeth, fire in his eyes, refusing to give up just like that. While he was locked in stalemate with the Ghost King, lights flared to life on either side of him. He glanced to his periphery to see Moran and Chuaning standing with him, their scarlet and golden light flowing steadily into his own, once again sealing the barrier. A terrifying roar came from above. The ghost eye disappeared. The three of them descended to the ground, and the sky rained rotten blood for a while longer before finally returning to clear water. Chushun, face pale, bowed to Moran and Chuaning. Many thanks for your help. Don't mention it, Moran waved his hands. Go get some rest. You look terrible. Chushun nodded. He had indeed burned through too much of his reserves, so Moran supported him to the corridor. The people who had been in disarray only a moment ago saw that Chu Gongzhe had repaired the barrier and saved them, so they gathered in gratitude, offering him water and draping clothing over his shoulders. Chu Gongzhe once said, "You're all drenched. Please go warm yourself by the fire." Chushun thanked them one by one, but he was too exhausted to move, and so could only turn down that person's invitation. Undaunted, the people carried over branches and made a bonfire beside him instead. Things gradually quieted down, save for the crackling of the flames. Suddenly, someone asked, Gongja, we took so many precautions, but somehow the Ghost King still saw through it all. Hi, what should we do? Yeah. How did they know we were going to leave? Gongja said these ghosts couldn't tell the difference between the puppets and real people. So how did this happen? Could it be? The man's voice faltered, and he snuck a glance at Chushun. He clearly wanted to say that perhaps Chushun had been wrong, that maybe somehow, somewhere, he'd messed up. The white-clad guards saw that glance, and one of them swept in to rebuke the man with furrowed brows. What are you trying to say? It's obviously because someone couldn't keep their trap shut and leaked the plan to the Ghost King. Who would tattle to the ghosts, though? The person mumbled. It's not like there's anything to be gained from that. Then, seeing all the infuriated glares directed his way, he stopped talking, disgruntled. A while passed in silence before someone else said, Gongja, that damn ghost definitely won't leave it at that. What should we do? Chushun, exhausted, didn't open his eyes, but his voice remained gentle. We just have to hold out until dawn and then be on our way. They can do nothing in daylight. We have so many people, the elderly, the young, and some injured too. Can we make it to Putuo Mountain in a single day? Don't worry about that, Chushun said softly. Get some rest. Just focus on the journey tomorrow, and I'll take care of the rest. Chu Gongzhe had always protected his citizens. When he said this, everyone listened and did as they were told. A little kid came over holding a piece of sesame candy and offered it to Chushun. Chushun opened his eyes slightly and patted his head with a smile. He was about to say something when a shouting guard ran over in a panic. Gongzhe, something terrible has happened. What is it? The little Gongja, shaman outside the city god temple. Right. Right. No, right. The guard was too shocked to finish a sentence. He stammered some more, then fell to his knees and sobbed miserably. Chushun shot to his feet, what little color that lingered on his face draining away as he rushed into the rain. Well, that's right on time for the break. So we're on page 237 for chapter 67, which is called This Venerable One's Heartfelt Anguish. On that lovely note, go take a walk, maybe pace around your house, find a nice comfy blanket and some tea, or maybe some booze for this next part. And I'll be back. More tea for me. I don't have any booze in the house. And when we come back, we'll dive into some heartfelt anguish, apparently. See you in a minute. Alrighty, welcome back. I am opening the book to the heartfelt anguish page. Breezy asked what the next thing we're reading is, because after volume 2, we take a break to fit in something with kind of a maximum of 3 books, so anywhere from like 1 to 3 books, because as it turns out, this series, the length of 2 volumes of this series is roughly the equivalent to 3 volumes of another series. You know what I mean? So it's going to be a poll, but I imagine Guardian's gonna win it. Because it was the one that came the closest to giving Erha a run for its money whenever we had the poll for this one. So, undetermined, but it's a pretty safe bet that it's gonna be Guardian. Which I'm deeply excited about. But now for the heartfelt anguish. Whew. The city god temple stood at the very edge of Chushun's range of power. His barrier reached the stairs of the temple, but no farther. Inside the temple, candles flickered weakly. A dozen ghosts who had cultivated corporeal forms lined either side. Between the lines was a woman in red, tied up and facing away from them, her head tilted back as she gazed up at the statue on the altar. Next to her stood Xiaomen, his eyes downcast as he held firmly onto a young child. "Lenair!" Chushun cried out. The child was none other than Chushu's son, Chulan. Moran's heart lurched at the sight of the kid in trouble. He could still taste the pastry on his tongue. He made to go over, but was blocked by Chu Waning. "Don't." "Why not?" Chu Waning glanced at him. "Every one of them is already 200 years dead," he said quietly. "But this illusion has been manifested. I don't want you to get hurt." I realize there's more important things going on right now. But Moran fell silent. It was the truth. No matter what he did now, the dead were already gone, and there was no way to change that. The boy wailed from outside the barrier, nearly unintelligible. Papa, help me, please help Lenair." Chushun's lips quivered. "What are you doing?" he yelled at Xiaomen. "I've never done you wrong, let him go." Xiaomen ignored him, head lowered as if he had heard none of it. However, the hands clutching Chulan betrayed his inner hesitation. There was a mole between the thumb and forefinger of his left hand, and his hands trembled without stop, the veins on their backs starkly visible. By now, everyone taking refuge at the governor's residence had arrived as well. They murmured to one another, aghast and furious at the sight within the temple. "That's the Gongsha's son! How could this happen?" In a single motion, Xiaoman cut the ropes binding the red-robed woman. She seemed to come back to her senses and turned slowly around. She was beautiful, pure as a lotus flower, her neck long and elegant, but her face was paper pale, and her lips were tinted red as blood. The smile she directed at Chushun was more terrifying than it was lovely. The low light of the candles illuminated her face. The moment Chushun saw her, he froze, as did the people old enough to recognize her. There was sadness in her smile. Softly, she said, "Husband." Moran's expression was pure shock. Chu Waning watched on silently. The woman was none other than Chushun's deceased wife. Madame Chu looked to her side and lashed out her arm to take her son from Xiaoman. Though Xiaoman was unwilling, Madame Chu was a ghost and much stronger than he was, now that she had been freed from her bindings. She easily pulled the child from his grasp. However, the madam had died of illness before her child was even a month old, so the boy had never seen his mother. He kept crying for his father to save him. "Be a good boy and don't cry anymore. Mama will take you to your papa." Madame Chu hefted the child in her delicate arms and slowly walked out of the temple, down the rain-soaked stone steps to the edge of the Shanqing barrier. She stood facing Chushun, her joy mixed with sorrow. "My husband, it's been a long time. Have you been well?" Chushun couldn't speak. Who the fuck could? The tips of his fingers shook uncontrollably at his sides as those phoenix eyes stared at the woman behind the barrier, their rims slowly reddening. Lanera has already grown so big, Madame Chu continued softly. You've grown steadier, too. A little different from the man I remember. Let me take a good look at you. She reached out and her hand pressed against the barrier. She couldn't cross it, not while her body was that of a ghost. She could only gaze quietly across the flowing colors of the barrier at the person on the other side. Chushin's eyes slid closed, wetness clinging to his lashes. He pressed his hand to hers, separated by the barrier. Then his eyes opened. The pair gazed at each other, across life and death, just as in days before. Chushin choked back a sob. My wife. Where the family had been separated by life and death for many years, the time they had spent together had been pitifully meager. The high tongue tree I planted in the courtyard that year, did it take root? She asked. Chushin smiled with watery eyes. It's grown tall and beautiful. Did we need art? Did we need art for this? This is just a question. Was it really necessary? I'm glad, said Madame Chu, smiling gently. Chushin tried his best to keep smiling as well. Lenaire loves that high tongue tree. He's always playing under it in the spring. He likes high tongue flowers just like you. Every year during Qingming, there's a Qingming has a what's it called? A lot's happening. Footnote, thank you. Qingming, or the Pure Brightness Festival, or Tomb Sweeping Day, is a celebration to honor the dead in early April. All right. Wait. Does a preference for high tongue blossoms run in Chu Wanning's family? And if it does, doesn't that mean that Moran would have given Chu Wanning a blossom that he would have really, really liked? Just asking questions. Unable to keep up the act any longer, Chushin pressed his forehead against the barrier, tears falling without stop as his voice broke. Every year, during Qingming, he always picks the prettiest flower to place before your grave. Wanair, did you see? Every year, did you see? He was racked with sobs by the end, every word bleeding misery, until his composure finally fell apart altogether. Madame Chu's eyes also grew red. She was a ghost and had no tears to shed, but her miserable expression was no less unsettling to the onlookers. For a moment, all were silent, everyone wordlessly watching the scene before them. Someone wept quietly. Then a cold voice rang out from above. Of course she knows, but not for long. Moran's face instantly changed. It's the Ghost King. Chu Wanning's expression grew dark as well. This coward won't even show himself. Shameless. The Ghost King's laugh sounded like nails against metal and made their blood run cold. Lin Wanair is one of our number now. I didn't want to hurt her, but since you're so set on opposing me and even ruined one of my eyes, I'll just have to dig out your heart to inflict a worse pain on you. At these words, the ghosts in the temple began chanting incantations. Have some lovely art while we absorb what's happening. Lovely, right? Really pleasant. Really delightful. Okay. Oh, wait, I'm supposed to be turning the page. Sorry. Woo. Oh, there's a bot. Okay, hang on. I haven't seen a bot in here in a hot second. Where is it? Hang on. So sorry. Did I totally misinterpret something? That would be hilarious. Oh, gotcha. Oh, here, up here. Okay. Yeah. That's very bot activity. Hang on. Hang on. Cool. They should be taken care of. So sorry about that. It happens so infrequently that I forget it's even a thing. Fortunately. All right. The heart is no more. Let the past be erased. Madame Chu's eyes shot open and her voice shook. My husband, Lenaire, take Lenaire. The heart is no more. Let the connections be severed. Ooh, don't do what I think you're gonna do. Lenaire, quickly, go to your papa. Madame Chu tried to push her child across the barrier, but the thin layer of light kept him out, as if he too was a ghost. Xiaoman looked down at them from where he stood by the railing of the temple. His face, originally charming, twisted with a mixture of sorrow and glee. It's useless. I put a ghost mark on him, as the Ghost King instructed. He's just like you now. The barrier won't let him in. Behind them, the incantation rose like a tide. The heart is no more. Let reason be shattered. Husband! Madame Chu was already panicked beyond measure, clutching her child to her breast and banging on the barrier. Husband, take the barrier down. Oh! No! Oh, no! That just... Oh! Oh! I have no idea where I was. Hang on. Okay. There it is. Okay. Ooh. Husband. Take the barrier down. Take it down and let Lenaire in. You have to protect him. You have to protect him. I'm almost... The heart is no more. Let compassion be smothered. Husband! Madame Chu fell to her knees, her eyes wide as her whole body shook uncontrollably. Curse marks the color of her blood slowly climbed... Wrong. Curse marks the color of blood slowly climbed up her face. Our child, Lenaire, you promised me. You promised that you'd take care of him. Take it down, please. I'm begging you. Take it down. Husband! Chushun felt as if his insides were being ripped apart. Again and again, his hand lifted to dispel the barrier, only to fall back down. Outside the barrier, Chulan bawled loudly, staring up at him with a tear-stained face, his little hands reaching. Oh. I'm not sure I can read that. I don't think I can physically read that. It's just a line. It's just a line of dialogue. At the top. Hang on. I don't think I can read that, but that's important. Hang on. Hang on. Top of the... Yeah, right there. Right above, at the top of the page. I don't think my throat's gonna let me read that. Madame Chu held her child tightly in her arms, kissing his cheek. The pair of mother and son, one kneeling, one crying, begged Chushun to take down the Shanxing barrier and let the child in. Suddenly, someone in the crowd cried out, Gongja, you can't! You can't drop the barrier. You would doom the hundreds of people left in Linan. That's their ploy. Gongja, you can't drop the barrier. That's right, the barrier must be kept up. The common people's desire to live made them kneel one after another and grovel before Chushun, pleading, Gongja, please! You can't take down the barrier or everyone will die. Madam, please. One of them knelt and bowed before Madam Chu. Madam, please have mercy. Please be benevolent. We will be grateful to you forever. Just please don't make the Gongja take down the barrier. You are always so compassionate. Please, we're begging you. Anyone else thinking the wife might be in on it? In an instant, other than the guards and a handful of others, everyone was on their knees, begging and crying, their voices drowning out those of Madame Chu and her son outside the barrier. Chushun felt like he was standing on the point of a needle while being stabbed by thousands upon thousands of sharp knives. Each blade grew barbs within his flesh and tore through his organs. Before him were his wife and son, and behind him were the lives of hundreds. Thus tormented, he felt as if he had already died, as if he had been swallowed by flames and burnt to ashes. Nevertheless, the chanting continued, even more piercing than before. The heart is no more, let emotion be expunged. The heart is no more, let desire be dissipated. More and more curse marks climbed up Madame Chu's fair neck, nearly covering her face, and they began to bleed into her eyes. She could hardly speak any more and only stared at her husband in despair. She strained to utter, If you... I will hate you. Take Lenaire. I hate. The curse marks oozed into her pupils. Her body shuddered as if in agony, and she squeezed her eyes shut. I hate you. A wretched scream tore through the air, but by the end it turned into a bestial cry. Madame Chu's eyes flew open. Her gentle almond-shaped eyes were stained the color of blood, and the whites of her sclera had disappeared, for there were now 4 pupils in each eye. One air! Chushun cried out with boundless sorrow, forgetting for a moment that the changing barrier required its caster to remain inside, wanting only to be with his wife. Just as he was about to step out of the barrier, an arrow pierced the sky and landed firmly in his shoulder. The arm he had raised dropped back down to his side. It was a young man of the guard, still posed with bow in hand. Gongja, wake up, he self-righteously said to Chushun. You've always taught us that the righteous put the people before the self. Are those just pretty words? Will you throw away the lives of hundreds to save one person the moment your own interests are at stake? Put the bow down, an old woman next to the young man said shakily. How could you hurt the Gongja? Everything is the Gongja's choice. Gongja has already done his utmost. How could you be so ungrateful? As they argued, fearful cries broke out at the fore. Madame Chu had entirely transformed. Only a moment ago she had held her child with such love, but now she was no different from a beast. She howled toward the sky with saliva dripping from her mouth, her teeth growing longer by the second. In her arms, Chulan's voice had gone hoarse from crying, but in between sobs, he still called out Mama. What answered him were Madame Chu's blood-red claws, which pierced through his throat. All sound disappeared from the world. Droplets of blood drifted through the air like so many blossoms. It was just like that moment years ago when Madame Chu had stood by the window holding her newborn child as she watched the petals of newly bloomed haitang flowers dancing in the courtyard. She had cradled the child gently in her arms as she sang softly, Red haitang, yellow haitang, floating gently in the wind, children in a land far away, missing their mom and dad. That comes with a footnote. Based on ancient nursery rhymes in the style of jujitsu, bamboo branch poetry, a poetic form popular in the ancient Sichuan era. Red haitang, yellow haitang. The hand that had caressed Chulan so tenderly that year tore into his skull, his limbs, his flesh, floating gently in the wind. The rain came down in a deluge, blood pooling and flowing along the ground. The mother devoured her child's entrails. Children in a land far away. The eaves of the city god temple towered solemnly above. The year Chulan was born, his mother had knelt before this temple and clasped her warm, delicate hands in prayer. The chime of a clock had scattered the birds nearby, and in the haze of the fragrant candles she had bowed low to pray for her child's health and happiness, that he might live a long life free from worries. Missing their mom and dad. Chulan's heart was torn from his mangled body. Madame Chu sank her teeth into it, insatiable, blood dripping from the corners of her mouth. Chushun broke. He clutched his head where he had fallen to his knees and bashed his skull repeatedly against the ground. He wept, wretched and miserable, kneeling in the rain and the blood in front of his wife and son, in front of all the people of Linan. He knelt before the image of divinity, and he knelt in the mud underfoot. He knelt in the depths of sin, and he knelt in the heights of virtue. He knelt in untold gratitude, and he knelt in utmost hatred. He hunched over in the dust, his very soul torn apart and extinguished, disintegrated into dust. A long while passed before the people finally spoke in quavering voices. Gongsha, Gongsha, condolences. Gongsha's benevolence will not be forgotten. Chu Gongsha is righteous, truly a kind person. Truly a kind person. Someone had pulled their own child close and covered his eyes so that he wouldn't see the bloody scene. They only now let go to say to Chushun, Gongsha, you saved all our lives. The madam and the little Gongsha, they'll surely ascend to paradise. Take your child and get lost, someone else spat. Why didn't you and your child go to paradise instead? The parent backed timidly away. It all seemed so distant. Chushun felt like he had already died. The voices sounded as if they came from across an ocean, from across a life. In the torrential downpour, a man was covered in mud, and a thin layer of transparent light separated him from his wife and son, the dead on one side, the dying on the other. When Moran looked at this scene, he suddenly thought of his past life, in which he had wantonly slaughtered the innocent. He wondered if he had created more than one Chushun, more than one Chulan, more than one Madame Chu. He looked down at his hands. For a split second, they seemed to be covered in blood. Then he blinked, and it was only the ice-cold rain gathering in his palms and flowing down his hands. He trembled. In the next moment, a warm hand took his. Moran snapped out of it as if he were waking from a nightmare and found his little Shidi gazing up at him with concern. He looked so much like Chulan. Moran slowly knelt down to eye level with his Shidi, like a sinner begging forgiveness from the souls of the dead, and stared at him with eyes welling from both rain and tears. Chu Wanning said nothing, only reached up and patted him on the head. It's already happened, he said softly. It's all in the past. Taking a moment for that double meaning. You're right. A while passed before Moran wrangled out a sad smile. Lowering his lashes, he murmured, It's all in the past. However, even if it was all in the past, he had still done all those things. He hadn't killed Chulan, but how many people just like Chulan had died because of him? The more Moran thought about it, the more scared he became, and the more it hurt. Why had he been so cruel? Why had he been so unrelenting? End of chapter. We're on page 249 for chapter 68. Called This Venerable One Can't Bear It. Chulan was dead, but the illusion continued. Dawn was still hours away. the long nightmare not yet over. The survivors returned to the governor's residence, preparing to leave for Putuo Mountain as soon as morning broke. It was hard to believe that someone could carry on after suffering that kind of pain. Truth be told, it really did seem like all that remained of Chushun was a walking husk, his soul long since gone. As Moran moved through the city, he heard many people fretting. After all, Chushun had suffered so much. Putting aside the possibility that he would hold a grudge, in his current state, even if he was willing to lead everyone away from the city, their chances were significantly diminished. Not everyone thought only of themselves. There weren't a lot of them, but at least a few people were genuinely sad for Chushun. They all stewed in anxiety as they waited for the sky to brighten. What arrived before the rising sun was that cold and now familiar voice, rupturing the heavy night sky and reverberating above the barrier. This time the Ghost King addressed not Chushun, but everyone else in Linan. The sun will soon rise. This venerable one knows you plan to leave once day breaks. But have you really thought your plan through? Putuo is a long way from here, and you'll never make it there in a single day. Once night falls, you'll have to depend on Chushun for safety. Do you think he'll protect you? Also, acknowledging the absolute not coincidence in the Ghost King referring to himself as this venerable one. Mommy! A child started crying from fear at the terrifying voice, burrowing into his mother's arms. Everyone stared up at the sky. Only Chushun, standing in front of the governor's residence and leaning against the high tung tree, had his eyes closed, as if he heard nothing. His wife and son are dead because of you. Do you really think Chushun will defend you? He likely has something else in mind. Something to avenge his family, something to make you all wish you were dead. It's only human nature, after all. This venerable one was once human too, you know. Sure, there are kind people, but they're only kind for their reputation. Humans are vile by nature. Any so-called good person is just trying to get something in return for their deeds. Let's be honest. Once forced into a corner, they won't care whether other people live or die. The Ghost King's eerie voice echoed above them. This venerable one said it before. I never intended to take all of your lives. In fact, the living can serve us ghosts. If you don't believe me, just look at him. As he spoke, a black cloud billowed toward the barrier with Shaman standing on top of it. Next to him was a kindly man of about 40 or 50. That's Shaman's father, someone cried out in surprise. It's Shaman's father. Didn't he die? Even though his body was dismembered, everyone saw. How could this be? The Ghost King continued. As one of the 9 kings of the underworld, even if this venerable one does not exert control over life and death like Emperor Yanlo, it is but a simple matter to restore the appearance of the dead. If you serve me, I will grant you the lasting company of your deceased loved ones. However, if you oppose me, you'll end up like your Chugongje, watching your wife kill your child with your own eyes, powerless to do anything to stop it. All were silent within the barrier. Will you really trust him? Trust that he won't take revenge for his wife and child? Do you really think he'll take you from here all the way to Putuo? Someone glanced toward Chushun, their eyes already flickering with malice. Chushun finally looked up from where he stood under the flowering tree, his quiet gaze level with theirs. He honestly didn't know what to say at this point. A long while passed before he finally said, It already is what it is. What would be the point in harming you now? The Ghost King's ghastly laugh echoed from above the barrier. Very good, very good. He says he won't harm you. If you believe him, then go ahead and leave with him. But if you believe me, His voice roared with increasing intensity, as if it might pierce their eardrums and straight into their hearts. If you believe me, you will be rewarded. I can bring back your families. All you have to do is hand over Chushun. You just have to hand him over to me. I bear a grudge against him, not any of you. Hand him over, and you won't have to abandon your homes. Hand him over, and you can reunite with your families. Just hand him over, and it will all be over. The Ghost King's voice grew faint. I will wait at the city god temple till sunrise. The voice faded away. The deadly silence slowly gave way to a rising clamor as all eyes in the crowd turned toward Chushun. Chushun looked back at them with a calm, even expression. What should we do? Someone started muttering helplessly. What should we do, my husband? I'm so afraid. Mommy, I'm scared. I don't want to get eaten. The Ghost King isn't wrong, someone else said in a low voice. The supposedly kind people always have ulterior motives. We've seen plenty of their sort before. Chugongja might not have done anything yet, but look at him. Half dead as he is. Who's to say he won't do something crazy in the future? You're right, whispered someone who heard his words, in full agreement. For all we know, he's nursing that grudge, and just waiting to get us all killed. Treachery at the 11th hour is hardly unheard of. A rough-looking man suddenly stood up from the crowd. Grab him, he yelled. If we hand him over, we can live. Everyone went silent. A few moments passed before a young woman stepped forward and put herself in front of the man. How could you be so ungrateful? Her voice was soft but determined. Have you no dignity as a man? Piss off! The man kicked the woman to the ground and spit on her face. You're a stupid whore who sleeps with men. No family to speak of. The hell you running your mouth for? I have to take care of both young and old. I ain't gonna let my own family go through this shit. Chugongja, you're just gonna have to understand. With that, he made to seize Chushun. He hadn't taken a step before his leg was firmly grabbed. He looked down and roared furiously. Still getting in the way, you dumb whore. Go die by yourself if you want. How dare you try to drag everyone else down with you? The woman was no less enraged. I may be a prostitute, but at least I can tell right from wrong. If even cats and dogs know how to repay kindnesses, how could we humans not? Shut the fuck up. The man drove his boots down on her head until her entire face was mottled with bruises. By then, the rest of the crowd had also approached and formed a circle around Chushun. A few in the crowd tried to stop the rest, like the woman from the brothel had tried before, but their efforts were futile, like a single leaf caught in a raging current, swallowed in no time at all. Gongja, hurry and get out of here, an old woman yelled shakily toward Chushun. Chugongja, go! Just go! Don't stay for the sake of these animals, go! There was also the tender voice of a young child. Stop fighting! Mommy, Daddy, don't hurt the Gongja, don't hurt him! A maelstrom of commotion, disorder, and chaos. Chushun stood alone in the rain. He felt as if he was staring at a horde of ghosts who had crawled out of the very depths of hell. For a moment, he wanted to leave. Then his gaze landed on the people. Those living, breathing, crying people. He saw the young child bawling as he tried to stop his parents. He saw the young woman who had been the first to stand up for him, whose face was now bruised and swollen. He looked at the old woman shaking in the rain and the other dozen or so people standing with their backs to him, trying their best to stop the others. The foot that was about to leave paused. They had done nothing wrong. If he took down the barrier, these people would die too. So, it turned out that the most disgusting thing in the world was not ghosts or demons, but those cowardly, worthless beasts who wore human skins and hid in the crowd, willing to say and to do anything in the name of their own survival. At the end of everything, they would say, I only wanted to live. I'm pitiful and powerless. I've done nothing wrong. Chushun had thought that the people he protected were helpless, good people. He was wrong. Now those beasts shed their human skins, revealing their ugly, snarling, blood-red faces. They had been so well hidden. So well hidden. He no longer wanted to cry and bleed for those beasts in human clothing. They had been so sly, concealed so well amongst the good, kind people, their faces laughing at him, delighting in his powerlessness. You have no choice but to save us. If you drop the barrier, we'll take the people you want to save, the people actually grateful to you, together with us to hell. You have no choice, however much it sickens you. You chose to be virtuous. You chose to be a good person. Since that's the choice you made, it's your duty to sacrifice yourself to save everyone else. If you refuse, then you're a swindler, a pretender, a fake, worse than a beast. It was as if he could hear those people howling, could hear their shrill laughter. You have no choice! You have no choice! In that frenzied pandemonium and the tempest of rain and wind, Chushun slowly lifted his head toward the heavens. Dawn was finally about to break. The relentless downpour had washed the blood from the stone steps of the city god temple. Chushun and those who had tried to protect him were tied up and walking toward the structure. The scene was both sorrowful and laughable. The people had bound Chushun tightly and were smugly pleased that they had captured such a powerful person. They were completely unaware that Chushun could have easily turned the ropes to ash with but a single spell. Yet he didn't. Nor did he take down the Shangqing barrier. Enough blood had been shed in Linan. He didn't want any more innocent people to die purely for his own revenge. So it was that thin layer of light protected them all. Both the thankless beasts who had turned on him and the people who stood sincerely by his side. They arrived at the temple, but the Ghost King did not appear. Instead, they found a candle giving off black smoke that twisted into a dark silhouette. Why have you not dispelled the barrier? The moment the silhouette spied Chushun, that voice exploded with rage. Dispel the barrier! Over my dead body, Chushun said serenely. The black smoke let out a shrill shriek. Chushun, you must be mad. You lot kill him, or I'll take all your lives as soon as night comes. Daybreak. The first light of day illuminated the endless night. The Ghost King, unable to maintain his form in sunlight, fled into the darkness. The candle emitting the black smoke flickered and went out. Chushun pulled himself together. The city god temple stood on high ground. From there, he could see the morning mist gently shrouding the mountains and rivers, hiding their scars from view, and for a moment, everything looked like it had in the days of old. It was a beautiful spring. Chugongsha, sorry. It's not that we're cruel or heartless or anything. It's just that the Ghost King holds a grudge against you for ruining his eye. We have no other choice. What are you all still yammering for? Don't drag it out. We don't want any surprises. I've got a family back there who want to live. Who's more important, this one guy or all of us? The righteous put the people before the self. His words, not mine. Chu Wanning stood in the distance, looking at this person whose relation to him was unknown, his feelings complicated. A pair of hands suddenly covered his eyes. What are you doing? Chu Wanning whispered. I'm not letting you watch. Chu Wanning paused. Why? You'll be sad. Chu Wanning was quiet for a while, his eyelashes trembling against Moran's palms. I won't. I was the one who said it. Every one of them is already 200 years dead. Moran sighed softly from behind. After a long pause, he said, You little dummy. Then why are my palms wet? Chu Wanning didn't know how much time passed. Half an hour, 2 hours, or only a split second. Time blurred in the madness, the chaos. When he opened his eyes again, the Shangqing barrier had dissipated. Chushun lay in a crimson pool, surrounded by people and by ghosts, by demons wearing human skin, inhaling the scent of fresh blood. Ecstasy and guilt. Calamity past, the rest of their lives now lay open. Agony and sin. The hearts of people were indistinguishable from those of beasts. The air of the mortal realm smelled like death. Or perhaps this was hell. It was difficult to tell. The crowd slowly dispersed. There was no reason to fear ghosts during the day, so they went to find food, to rest, to wait for the Ghost King to return when night fell. He would inspect the body in the temple and reward them with the reunions he had promised with their deceased loved ones. Because we all know how reliable and honest Ghost Kings are. They always stick by their word, right? Eventually. Only a dozen or so people remained in the temple, weeping in grief. The young woman from the brothel was there, as was the white-haired old woman, the young child and his parents who had listened. A beggar, a scholar, a storyteller, the son of a once wealthy family, a widow holding her infant son, a teacher, and a farmer. No one else. As they wept over his body, the man lying dead in a pool of his own blood slowly opened his eyes. Gongsha! Chugongsha! Moran's heart quivered. Unable to bear it, he said, "No, this spell was a lost art in the modern age. He hadn't expected to see it being used in an illusion. The lingering voice spell. He's dead, but he's used this spell on himself before he died." Chuaning paused. He still had matters yet unattended, things he was worried about. Sure enough, Chushun's eyes were blank, their pupils dilated, and his voice was flat as he spoke. "Demons and ghosts are treacherous. You must not believe their words. Without the Shangqing barrier, they will overrun the city once night falls and slaughter at will. Please leave this place and head to Putuo." Gongsha, I have died and will be unable to accompany you. However, I have concentrated my entire lifetime's worth of spiritual power in my spiritual core. Bring it, and the ghosts will be unable to approach you. They wept even more sorrowfully. Moran and Chuaning's blood ran cold. His spiritual core. It was a crystalline formation within one's heart. Chushun's body slowly lifted its hand, which had not yet gone stiff, and under the control of his spell, it grasped the knife buried in his chest to pull it out. Then, Gongsha! The people around him cried out with grief, their voices twisted and hoarse, soaked with tears. Gongsha, what are you doing? With his own hands, Chushun ripped open the gash in his chest, dug into his flesh, and grabbed his no longer beating heart. Slowly, inch by inch, he tore it out. Blood dripped from the heart, which was enveloped in a golden red flame. It was Chushun's spiritual core, the last flare of light from a candle that had burned out. Take it. He lifted the flaming heart and held it out in front of him. Take it. Take it. Droplets of blood fell only to become so many red haitang blossoms, flaring brilliantly as they drifted downward. The road ahead is long and unpredictable. My life ends here, and I can do no more. Please. Please take care of yourselves. As the scene unfolded before Moran's eyes, he broke out in a cold sweat. He felt like thorns were digging into his back. The scar. That scar. He had suddenly remembered that on Chuaning's chest, where his heart lay, there was a scar. That same spot on Chuaning was extremely sensitive. How could Moran forget it? Whenever he licked that pale scar as they lay entwined in bed, Chuaning's usually impassive face would reveal a hint of the desire that he kept suppressed. That expression only stoked Moran's own desire even higher, so he had always particularly enjoyed humiliating the person beneath him in this way. In his past life, he had never cared about Chuaning's history, and so had never asked how he'd acquired that scar, all the way until his death. Now in this life, he no longer had the right to ask. that's the end of the chapter. And it's 5 o'clock exactly. That was, we're on, sorry. Page 261 next time for chapter 69, which is called This Venerable One Will Learn From You. There's like a little laugh after that, which is a little weird. So we get left with that question until Tuesday. You know, at times like this, having read a few very heavy things out loud for the first time for people, I can just really kind of hope that I somehow do that even a fraction of justice. So I hope I did, because stuff like that deserves to be read well. So I hope it's okay that at times like that I try to do something. It is particularly cruel that the last fucking things he says just so happens to be the exact thing that I tell you guys all the time. So that has taken me off guard. I don't know why. I don't know why that's punched me in the face quite that hard. But we'll evidently find out or discuss or theorize, what have you, next Tuesday to see if that is what we think it is. To see if there's like reincarnation, or it's just like generational trauma and this is a wound that runs so deep that it was just passed on down the line, which would fucking make sense. We need details, or more to the point, I need details. I hope you have a lovely weekend. Go do something nice to yourself, like I always say after we get through points like this in stories. Go do something nice. Go watch cat videos. I'm probably going to go to Starbucks and get some coffee and a chai latte for the wife. Please have a lovely weekend. Go outside and breathe for a second. Do whatever it is you need to do. And I will be back here next Tuesday at the same time, 3 p.m. to see what the fuck. I love you all very much. I can't say it this time, but you understand why. So I will see you guys next Tuesday, okay? Whew.